This video is a lot of things, but I'll tell you what it isn't. It isn't about making excuses, nor is it about cutting corners, and it most definitely isn't about beating a dead horse. Okay, that's a lie. This video is all of those things, and a whole lot more. Welcome back to Inheritance Machining. Last time, I made this sexy little mechanism. It's a ball burnishing tool for the lathe, and it's supposed to make your round parts look real nice. I got mixed results, but I got a lot of suggestions in the comments on what I could do better. So rather than revise my original design and make something better, I'm just going to jump ahead to the part where I make the same tool for the mill. Partly because I'm not sure how desperately I need to burnish on the lathe, and largely because I desperately need to burnish on the mill. So that's what I have here, a mill burnishing tool. Or at least the start of it. This will be the shank of the whole deal. Actually, let me just show you. It's going to look like this in the end, and the principle is basically the same as last time. Bearing balls will contact the surface I want to burnish, and they're supported by a tapered roller bearing race that lets them roll while also pushing them into the material. There are a couple of fun bits that hold this all together, some Belleville springs, and an adjustment nut that I'll explain later, and of course the R8 style shank for mounting this in the mill. By the way, all of this was modeled in Onshape, who I'm grateful for their continued support of the channel. If you weren't aware, Onshape just launched their new cam studio, which by the looks of it is pretty freaking powerful. And on top of that, they're soon to release even more features including 5-axis capabilities. Check out the link in my description to get started with Onshape for free. Now this shank. It doesn't yet look like anything in the design, mostly because it's not finished. It's out of the lathe for a good reason though, because it's got to go back in between centers. Turning like this without gripping either end basically lets the material relax, letting me sneak up on it and turn away any disobedient curvature, warpage, or otherwise unacceptable unstraightness. This little guy here has to do with the threads that we'll get to later, because now it's time to work on the taper that makes this R8 taper a taper. Did I mention it's a taper? It's called an R8, but this angle isn't actually 8 degrees, it's 8.43 degrees. This extra 0.43 is important for a reason I'm unsure of, but I do know my little scale here on the compound isn't nearly accurate enough, so a little trigonometry is needed. If I break this setup into a triangle, then I can correlate the reading on the dial indicator to the distance moved on the compound and get an angle. Or I can do it the smart way and flip all this around so that the angle I want tells me the indicator reading I should be looking for. Bada bing. And just to confirm everything is right, I can run the indicator along some other piece of R8 tooling, which I guess I could have done in the first place and saved myself my Sineity, but where's the fun in that? Now, R8 tooling like this is something I would normally want to heat treat and grind to help with its durability. But this is an untested design, and that seems like a whole lot of trouble when this thing may not work at all. If only there was some other operation I could do to help with this. Okay, let's burnish it. I'm going to try a few new things though. First is replacing the hardened steel ball with a tungsten carbide one, which is quite a bit harder and also possibly, hopefully, has a smoother surface. I'm also going to use clean cutting oil rather than the nasty flood coolant from the reservoir, which should help with the smoothness. And finally, I'm going to try running without spring pressure at all. This may have been causing some resonance last time, so I'm just going to bottom the tool out with a very scientific amount of "that feels right." It certainly looks a lot better than what we started with, at least right here. The taper I had to hand feed could be better, but it'll be aight. So I'll pop some chamfers on this fella, turn down this middle section a little, and then we can start on the threads. Now I've been running this whole part purely with friction, but I don't want any chance of things slipping while threading. That would scrap this part in a real big hurry, so I'll play it safe and bring the drive dog in. Last is the threaded hole in the end for the mill's drawbar, but not really last, just last here on the lathe. Over on the mill, I still have to drop a keyway on here. As I was saying, I have to carefully drop a keyway on here, then pop a hole in the other end, which gets stretched out to make a slot. You didn't think I'd forget these, did you? And just like that, we have an R8 shank that will pop right in the mill. Man, all that work keeping things straight and still. I think it'll be fine though, as long as we keep this little secret between you and I. Kinda like the secrets I keep with the help of today's sponsor, Incogni. Put simply, Incogni is an online service that works to remove your personal information from the deepest, darkest corners of the internet. The risks of your info being out there are threefold: spammers, scammers, and the fact that you have no control over who has your information. And it all comes down to one common problem: data brokers. They collect your data, organize it, and sell it all to the highest bidder. Imagine your address, financial data, health information, even your children's names landing in the wrong hands. This is where Incogni stops this harmful practice. They intercept the data brokers on your behalf, requesting your data's removal, and handle any resistance. It's all done automatically too, so you can get back to the things you'd rather be doing. And because it's automated, Incogni can routinely follow up to make sure your data stays removed, which is exactly why I recommend an annual plan to stay on top of the problem. So keep your secrets off the internet with Incogni. Use the code INHERITANCE at the link below and get 60% off an annual plan. Alright, if you thought that part was fun, this next one is going to be nut. I'm going to need a through hole for test fitting the threads though, so cutting this to length before I start machining is going to save me a whole lot of drilling later. Since I had to hold on to this part in the chuck, I obviously couldn't turn everything at once, but I also want everything on this unfinished side to be aligned with the threads. Luckily I have the perfect tool to make sure that happens. The shank we already finished. If I get this trued up, then I can just use it to true up the nut itself. Well, that was easy. Left a little damage on here, but we'll take care of that in a minute. First though, this side is desperately missing something. Much better. Okay, let's make this look more nut-like. The first flat is self-explanatory, but in a way it's kind of important because it sets the precedent. It acts as the guide which all the other flats will be milled. So after using an angle block to set the third and fifth flats, I can use the parallel underneath to mill the second, fourth, and sixth flats. Which is just a long-winded way to say this is nothing special. Some might even say run-of-the-mill. But I do want to add one more thing. A hole at the center of each face. This will let me turn the nut with a simple rod if I don't feel like hauling out my massive 2-incher. It also just makes it look a little more interesting. Alright, now that you've seen my shank and my nut, let's work on something that isn't a double entendre. The tapered roller bearing hub, which I fortunately get to skip the bandsaw and jump right into machining. But only just, because after the first cut I realized, well, that's not even remotely big enough. Now this stock is extra special because it came with a starter hole already in it, which means it was probably for a project that my late grandfather started back in the day. So in a cool sort of way, it's like I'm picking up where he left off. Either that, or I'm completely ruining some plan he had for this piece. I like to think that he'd approve though. After nailing the fit with the shank, I can jump back to the outside dimensions, taking them to size, and parting this off. The other side gets face to length and a big meaty chamfer added before moving over to the mill. This one stops short of the full hexagonaling, but it does get a reamed through hole in the face, this time for a dowel pin, and to hold that dowel pin secure a set screw is needed. So I'll mill a flat to get things started on, then do the threading thing. A hub wouldn't be a hub without a bolt circle, so after finding the center of the bore with a coaxial indicator, I can drop a nice 5-lug pattern on here. That's it for this one, bringing me to the biggest and most complicated piece of this build, the end cap that holds all the balls and bearing in place. It's got several unique features, but like everything on the lathe, it starts with the simple stuff. The bore, while short, is also very large, and while I wish I had a drill big enough, I'll just have to resort to a more boring approach. This bore has actually gotten so large that I don't even need the boring bar at all. I can switch back to my trusty turning insert, which does a much cleaner job with the final cuts in here. Up next we have some trepanning. You can call it face grooving though if you don't want the headache. After squaring up the cutter with the face of the part, I can very, very slowly bring it in. Trepanning always makes me a little uneasy so I tend to avoid it when I can, but in this case I need some clearance around the bearing, and this is the only way that's going to happen. On the bright side, you can almost always count on some interesting swarf. Last inside job taking this face a little deeper, then after chamfering the outside edge, we can start on the adventure that is parting this off. Obviously, we can't leave this face in this condition, so this time I'll grab it by its insides and we can bring it up to snuff. I like it. Time for the mill. This piece will mate with the 5-lug pattern on the bearing hub, so it needs the pattern itself. Only this one will be with through holes and countersinks for some flathead screws. While I'm here, I'm also going to drill the start of the 5 bearing ball holes. It's not deathly critical that they're in line with the central bolt pattern, but it certainly makes it look a lot nicer. And it also gives me a way to relocate everything once I flip this over. I can just use a pin in the spindle to position everything based on the original set of holes. But it never hurts to double check alignment. First things first though, I need to clean up the blowout on the bottom of these little fellas. Then we can get to the fun stuff. I mean boring, the boring stuff. Step 1 is to work through each of the holes, opening them up little by little. Not to the size of the balls that will go in them, but slightly smaller. I need to leave a little bit of a lip here so that they don't just fall out. Once they're all to the same size, now I can come back in here and open them up the rest of the way. But like I just showed, not all the way through. I'll set my reference to a known face, zero the quill indicator at this point and run the quill stop up, then finally raise the table to the right distance and I can send the boring head on its way, letting the quill stop cut the feed at exactly the right depth. Alright, that's it. Somehow I made it all the way through this build without so much as oh wait, I did break an end mill. Anyway, that's all the parts finished, and all the other parts purchased, so let's put it together. Well, we have our first problem. And thinking back on it, I realized I totally didn't check the fit of this bearing on the hub. Looks like it's really close though. Alright, where were we? There it is, a baby. I won't say it. While this came together nicely, it feels like it's still missing something. A little pizzazz, a little flair, a little... Let me just... Okay, that's a lot better. Amazing what a little color can do. And of course... Okay, let's see if it works. I'm going to start with something easy like aluminum. Even though, yes, I did have trouble burnishing aluminum in the lathe, this is a whole different setup, so I'm optimistic. If there's anything I learned from last time though, it's that the starting finish is as important as anything. A perfect excuse to whip out the big fly cutter. Even with that, it's a pretty decent reflection, but will the burnisher make it any better? The Belleville washers of the design will give me a little more control compared to a normal coil spring. Depending on the number I stack in here, I can affect the spring rate, then the adjustment that sets the preload. An online calculator tells me this should be about 400 pounds total, or 80 pounds per ball. So I'll zero the burnisher on the top surface, raise the table slightly, and send it on its way. Okay, if I'm making chips, I might be pressing a little hard. Yeah, definitely not an improvement. Let's calm things down a bit and try again. I can still see the ball groove, so let's slow the feed down this time and give it another go. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. That's a damn good reflection. But if I focus the camera just right, you can see I'm getting a slight orange peel effect. So I'll wipe the slate clean and try with a much higher preload. Also this time I'm only going to raise the table ever so slightly between passes until it looks good. Wow, that's a really good finish. I'm still getting that orange peel, but I guess that's just what aluminum does. Still, I'm not displeased with this. So let's bring in something a little harder, some steel. And we'll keep the settings the same. So it's kind of working, but there's a problem. When I pass across an edge, I get this patterning, which must be what happens when the force on each ball changes when some of the balls leave the part. It's kind of cool, but also not what I wanted. I actually just noticed the same thing happened on the aluminum, only a lot less. So let's try this again, without the springs. My thinking with this is that while I won't have as much control over the pressure, as the balls come and go across the edge, the force won't be redistributed to the other balls because the tool is locked in place rather than sliding up and down on the shaft. Of course, when you think about it, the whole mill is a big spring, albeit a very stiff one, so there's probably only so much I can do about this. Just like I suspected. It's much less pronounced, but still there. I do have one more idea though. The pressure can't change across the balls if there's only one ball in the tool. This means the ball probably won't roll, but it's tungsten carbide, so let's just see what happens. Yeah, that was silly. At the start, it did seem like the ball was rolling and the patterning on the edges wasn't happening, but as I increased the pressure, the ball definitely locked up, and this is the result. You can even kind of see where on the ball the rubbing was happening. I guess by definition this is burnishing as well, but clearly I have a lot to learn if I want this to actually look good. It's not all bad though, we did manage to make this, which is kinda cool. But thinking about it, unless I have a part that has no edges, which isn't a thing, this burnishing tool isn't very useful. It's always going to make weird patterns rather than the perfect mirror finish, so maybe a redesign is in order, or maybe this is a lost cause. Let me know what you think in the comments. Either way, this was a fun project to kind of mess around with and just see what happened, and I think we learned a few things along the way. The real question is, will those lessons stick? As always, thanks for watching, and see you next time.